Continue with the chapter reading of the Arabs at War in Afghanistan by Mustafa Hamid. This is chapter 7 of the series, and it's entitled Arrival of the Pakistani Trainer Rashid Ahmad. The training situation for Arabs and Afghans changed with the arrival of Rashid Ahmad. He's one of the most important contributors to the Afghan jihad, but until now, his contribution has gone unremarked. Rashid was a Pakistani army major who volunteered to join the jihad. He worked for a period with Jalaluddin Haqqani, to whom he offered his training services, before moving to join forces with Maulawi Mansour. And remember, Haqqani was favored by the ISI due to their affiliation with Arab fundamentalists as well. Haqqani also had a very militant nexus central to um, the country itself, and they were actually very good guerrilla fighters. The Haqqani network, they would be called later. Few people knew about Rashid's contribution to the jihad, but it was very important. The story of Rashid is an interesting one that I first heard about in 1981 from my friend Haqqani and from Rashid himself, as well as others. Haqqani found Rashid in a market in Miran Shah, where he was bargaining to purchase a gun for himself. Rashid was accompanied by his nephew Wahid, who was a very nice young man, around 18 years of age. Rashid did not have enough money to purchase the gun at the price the Kuchi shopkeeper wanted, so he told him, "Please reduce the price of the gun because it is for jihad." One of Haqqani's intelligence people was in the market at the time and overheard the conversation and returned to tell him. Haqqani sent his men to bring Rashid and then asked him about his story. Haqqani found out Rashid had been in the army but had resigned to join the jihad. The army did not allow its officers to join the jihad, so Rashid told his army bosses, "If you do not allow us to participate in the forward defense of our country in Afghanistan, then we cannot defend it inside Pakistan." He told them, "We should fight directly in Afghanistan. We should go." His army bosses said, "No. Our policy is to train the Afghans and give them weapons and courses and help them fight." Rashid argued, "We should go inside and organize them and fight with them until they can stand on their own feet." They did not agree, and so Rashid left. I'm going to block myself out so you can read it. When he tried to do in Afghanistan, he was the first to try to do this, and he was absolutely right because it needed to be done. My friend Haqqani was convinced. So Rashid joined Haqqani and went to fight on the front lines, where he did some important and essential work. First, he trained the Afghans on weapons use for the front. This was very good because before that, many of the Afghans had not been properly using their weapons. Now, remember, a lot of these Afghans, too, basically are from nomad tribal areas and didn't, experience large-scale warfare. They're used to more guerrilla warfare, tribal warfare, not large-scale warfare. Rashid trained them on how to use the heavy guns. He trained Haqqani's brothers Khalil and Ibrahim how to use the 122 millimeter howitzer, Soviet weapon that was used in their attacks against the enemy in Gardez in 1981. Rashid also taught them how to use the 75 millimeter artillery effectively. He taught them how to use it tactically and to absorb the enemy's attack. And this is the reason why the Haqqani network was a formidable clan, in that they took that training under Rashid and they became trainers. And who did they train? Al-Qaeda. And they weren't called Al-Qaeda in the beginning, but many of the Egyptians that came over out of the prisons of the Sadat assassination traveled to Afghanistan and joined the jihad. People like Abu al-Masri, who later would be renamed to Muhammad Atta. He would be later on the military commander of Al-Qaeda. What about the military commander before him? Abu Ubaidah al-Banshiri, also a police officer. Ali Muhammad. There's a lot of Egyptians that got the training under the Haqqani network because Haqqani network, along with Abdul Rasul Sayyaf, were the only Afghans who allowed Arabs to fight alongside them. They put this training to use to hit an enemy barracks in Gardez. The reaction of the enemy to the new tactics Rashid introduced and the better use of weaponry under his training was very strong. Can you imagine? To hit Gardez with that 122 caliber weapon? It was not a joke. The enemy took this very seriously and used all available artillery to return fire. Although Rashid's men had a limited supply of ammunition, they provoked a strong reaction from the enemy, who replied with artillery and helicopters and jets. I was there during this heavy bombardment and fighting. For every one bullet Rashid or his trainers fired, around 100 shells came from the enemy. You cannot imagine the impact it had. It raised everyone's spirits, and the enemy became crazy because of Rashid's clever tactics and his training of Khalil and Ibrahim Haqqani and others. Rashid also used a heavy mortar. I cannot remember the caliber, but it was an Egyptian weapon. They only used it a few times because there were only a limited shells available, but it was very effective. We had a big adventure with this gun. Later, when the SAM 7 came, Rashid trained him on this weapon. It was Egyptian supplied. He trained me too. In fact, I was his assistant for a while firing these missiles. The missiles themselves were expired and they should have been replaced or disposed of because the seeking head was no longer effective. The result was that the missiles could not be used to seek a target. They could only be used aimed straight at a target. Rashid also trained the fighters at Haqqani's front to use the Soviet 12.7 millimeter and the 14.5 millimeter heavy machine gun, as well as Chinese weapons. He trained them how to fire those weapons, but also in the tactics of their use. The tactics were more important to know because we use these weapons in unusual ways at the front, in ways the Mujahideen came to know as guerrilla warfare. Most of the trainers who gave guidance to the Mujahideen, even those volunteers who had previously been in the military, gave training according to the conventional use of weapons. In our environment, this was very dangerous and ineffective. But Rashid was an excellent student and fighter in guerrilla warfare. Because of this, Rashid came to have an excellent reputation with the Afghans in the area, and they all knew his name. I saw children run up to him to say hello. He was also known by the enemy who released propaganda against him. When I met Rashid in Gardez in 1981, he was only 28 and a major. He said, I am the youngest in Pakistan with this rank. He was a very nice, very good boy. Rashid also gave Haqqani advice in the battles, and Haqqani listened to him and took on his experience as an officer. But in 1983, they had a disagreement during the Leah battle. I was there for this misunderstanding, which turned into a confrontation between them. Haqqani talked with Rashid very roughly, and Rashid became angry and left Haqqani forever. This was the last time I worked with Rashid at the front lines, because after this, he left the front and joined with Malawi Yunus Khalis, and then later, Malawi Nasrullah Mansour. As you can see, you'll notice throughout the book, too, that a lot of the Afghan clans basically were argumentative, almost to a fault. You could say they were even born contrarians, right? But that's why a lot of these Afghan warlords, these leaders, basically were the enemy to themselves. And they still beat the Soviets, but they had U.S. help and Pakistani help. All right, guys, that's it for this video. That's it for this chapter. See you in the next video. Take care, everybody. Have a good night. Stay safe.